So welcome to Engage 2020. My name's Sophie Duncan and I'm here with Paul Manners and we direct the NCCPE and we're really delighted to welcome you to this event. Normally we'd be meeting in person, so this year's event feels really different. And we really hope we've managed to maintain many of the aspects which mark out the conference as an important part of the engagement calendar. The purpose of this opening plenary is partly to look back, to take stock of this extraordinary year that we're living through, but also to look ahead to the rest of the week and explore the key theme of this year's event, the future of university public engagement.
So to prepare for the plenary, we've interviewed a collection of public engagement professionals and to ask them for their reflections on the year that's passed. And you're going to hear their thoughts woven through the next 75 minutes. And you'll also meet many of them in person as they're going to join us today. We planned a breakout space in the middle, a chance for a bit of a collective breath. And then we're going to introduce our 4 conference reporters who are going to be working with us over the course of this week to post daily reports on the highlights from the conference from their perspective. And they'll be back for our closing plenary on Friday. So this is how we kicked off our interviews.
If you could use one adjective to describe the last 12 months, what adjective would you choose?
That's a great question.
That would be roller coaster. I realise it's not an adjective, but we've kind of been on this huge, great trip, and sometimes it's nice and smooth, and sometimes you're at the top of a rise and you can see this huge new vista before you, and sometimes it's just loop-the-loop and corkscrewing all the time.
Challenging would be the word I used.
It's really highlighted the fragile and the provisional nature of our lives to a large extent.
Stushy. It's been a bit of a stushy. There's been an awful lot of disruption in the last 12 months.
Flickering. It's allowed us to catch glimpses of things, maybe of different futures or different pasts, as they kind of come in and out of focus.
It's really hard. It's been a weird few months.
Repetitive. Humbling.
The adjective that I would choose is revealing. I think some of the new ways in which we are relating to one another is quite hopeful.
I say challenging in a literal way because it has been hard. It's thrown up challenges to try and overcome. But I think it's also challenged, as in it's kind of pushed people, it's pushed me, it's pushed organisations to think in new ways, and often those new ways are good. What we prioritise in life and work.
Brilliant, but brilliant words that really help us remember what the last year's been like. So I don't know about you, but I don't know if any of those words resonated with you, but I thought it would be super fun to do a quick poll. This is not a popularity contest for the people who suggested these words. This is about which of these words resonated with you. And maybe if you look at them and say, do you know what? I've got a completely different word. Why didn't you pop it in chat? So I'm going to launch the poll now. So tell us which of these resonated with you, which of those words. And for some of you, you won't have heard of the word stushy. I don't even quite know how to pronounce it, but we've given a definition. And I imagine that our lovely delegates from Scotland are well familiar with that term. Oh, we've got Maria saying earthly. Earthly. Well, that's a really interesting word, Maria. Vari from Scotland telling us that stushy is very apt. If only we had that language to use. It's not something I'd come across before, but I'll be using it from now on. Great. So any more people want to contribute to the poll? Quite a few of you there. A lot of people choosing roller coaster. Quite a few of you choosing stushy. It's obviously very popular. Emma Martinez is suggesting different. And yeah, Claudia, there was a lot of loss in 2020. There's been a lot of loss, and it's been for that reason very, very, very hard. Vari, educational. David, provisional. Ah, yeah, these are great words. Oh, Sophie saying tearful. I mean, I think teaful, yes. I don't know about you, but I'm certainly drinking a lot more coffee and tea. Oh, that's brilliant. Oh, Fran, it's like a nightmare. Yeah, no, that's a great word, but really sad word. But so oh, and then Tia, you're saying turbulent, like a bit like a roller coaster. And Amy, oh, it's tiring. Oh, I'm sorry if I'm missing out your comment. Please don't feel offended. It's just that so many of you are sharing words I can't quite keep up. So relentless. Oh, and I don't know what that word means, Frey. Dry. Do you want to give us a definition, or is it just me who doesn't understand that? Why don't you tell us a bit more? That would be great. Yeah. And Jenny saying, surely unprecedented should have got an honorary mention. That term, it's being used all the time in the media, isn't it? Oh, yes, you do get to see the poll results, Kathy. It's just that I'm getting so excited by the chat, I forgot to share it. Let me do that. And then I can share results. I hope you can see them now. Forgive me for not sharing them earlier. It's just as well we've got a really good group of people helping me stay on it. So yeah, so I think roller coaster and sushi were the top words that resonated with us. But lots of people saying that they had other words that they'd like to share. Oh yeah, Nat, challenging the status quo. Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen a lot of that, haven't we? A lot of the idea that we could reimagine futures because change can happen when it has to happen. And I think that makes me feel both very, very sad for what we've been living through, but actually quite astonished that change could happen. Oh, and Tarek saying a reality check. Yeah, absolutely, a reality check. That's a great word. Oh, well, I hope that you found that useful and that it's tuned you into starting to think about last year. And one of the things that we would quite like to do is to think together both about some of the challenging things, and a lot of those words were about those challenging things, but also about some of the positive things that have come out of it, which perhaps words like flickering give us a kind of a kind of sense of maybe there are some things that are coming into focus that are really important and valuable. So in a moment, we're going to go into breakout rooms or reflections on our own to think about those things. But first, I wanted to share some of the reflections from our interviewees. And first, this film is going to cover what they found most personally challenging.
The thing that I found most challenging was probably the initial period. You kind of like built this house over time, and then these tornadoes came through and wrecked it, and it was just the initial shock of what you actually have to do now.
Remote working. It's really hard to feel like you're making any progress when everything's online. You have to kind of change the way that you think about things and the way that you do things.
Being able to be in the same place as other people. And by place, I mean either geographically or in terms of headspace. I feel that some of the joy and some of the immediacy has been lost.
I draw a lot of my energy, particularly working with students when I'm seeing them face to face. Doing it online is completely different, and I find that coming away I'm sort of drained rather than energized, which is how I normally feel when I work with them. So I think that's one of the things I found really challenging this time.
I think the most challenging thing from the last 12 months has been the isolation, and the impact that's had on my mental health, as well as others in the community, has been quite profound.
For me, the day-to-day challenge and the thing I find quite exhausting is that we've sort of lost informality. I'm missing the informal chats where you can just talk over each other if needed, and it's not quite as chaotic as doing that on a video call.
The most painful thing has been not being able to be with loved ones, especially during periods of grief. I have lost 7 people in my extended family to COVID, including a 31-year-old nephew 10 days ago. And I couldn't go there and hug them, hug their parents, hug their spouses, hug their siblings, their children.
In a real battle at times, and I use that word advisedly. I've found the bottom of the depths where I never thought it was possible to go. And I've also found ways of looking after myself and managing it that I never thought were possible as well.
Yeah, some some really difficult and poignant challenges, and Rajesh's account of it's just a stark reminder of just how devastating the impact of this pandemic has been, and many of us have lost those that we love. I guess one of the things that came out of the reflections that our interviewees gave was just how people-centered work, like public engagement, has been dramatically affected by social distancing and the fact that we can't meet together in collective groups, and we can't, as Rajesh said, we can't hug one another. Collectively, it's been amazing how public engagement professionals have worked around the challenges of lockdown, and there have been some really inspiring practices that have been developed by many of the delegates in this room. But perhaps it's not really only we're only beginning to understand the full consequences of this shift to online, and beginning to understand the impact that has on our mental well-being, on our relationships, and on how we understand how we work together. This shift in how our professional and personal identities have begun to blur, it's really changed. And this morning in the networking, someone was reflecting on how nice it is to see into people's homes, to see their children, to see their pets, to see the artwork that they've got on their walls. And there's something really special about the intimacy of engaging with people online when they are based in their own home. But actually, it's still that disconnect of not being able to read one another's body language. Someone very graciously said, "Oh, how on earth am I going to do this plenary? I'm used to kind of engaging with you and having a huge amount of energy, and now I'm sitting at the desk I've sat at for the last 8 months, and it feels different, and I can't see your responses. I can't see how you're feeling. I can't read the room and say, oh gosh, we need to leave more time for people to reflect here, or we need to hustle on, or I need to change the dynamic, because I can't read the room anymore." And for those of us who care about engaging people really fully, it's really, really hard. So there's a lot of tough stuff, but also there's been some positive things. And we asked our interviewees to reflect on some of these from their perspective, but also some of the things that they felt proud of in their own and their team's work. So first, let's hear some positives.
Well, I expected when the pandemic hit, I really expected to see a decline in the interest and drive of the researchers to do public engagement within my centre, which I think would be completely understandable considering everything. But I actually saw an increase, and that was really heartwarming. And they felt like public engagement was more important because a lot of the people that they work with already feel isolated pre-COVID. So they felt like not only did the engagement serve a purpose, for whatever the project's purpose was, they felt like it also served a purpose to help deal with that loneliness and isolation.
And there has been such a lack of ego or the need to be an expert or define yourself by a discipline. And there has been a sort of a wildness about them in kind of embracing uncertainty and taking chances and being vulnerable together, and some really extraordinary generosity.
That's been watching how my colleagues have so quickly adapted to new situations that we couldn't have even thought about before. So really, truly getting to the bottom of how they engage with their audiences, what matters to those audiences, how they can reach them. So finding new techniques online, but also thinking about what they can do offline as well.
In a funny way, for me, the thing that's been nicest to see isn't so much about the output, but how it's changed working culture. We've produced tons and everyone's been working really hard. But actually the nicest thing has been the way in which we've done it, in that I think people have been kind of empowered, expected, understood in how they've brought more of themselves to work.
I liken universities to being cruise ships. So most of the time we are frantically kicking it away at the back, madly with our feet, trying to change their direction. And the one thing that's given me hope is the fact that universities can pivot when they need to. If there's one thing that's coming out of COVID, it's how fast universities and the university communities can respond to the community needs and actually get things done in a very short span of time. And that has been really impressive for me.
Yeah, and I would share that. It's been really impressive to me. For those of you who know me, I've been working at the NCCPE since it started 12 years ago. And we were set up to try and inspire a cultural shift in how universities engage with the public. And then, you know, you look at those 12 years and you see some headway gained, and then this awful thing happens, and we discover that actually universities can change quite quickly. And there have been loads of really interesting examples of universities stepping up from the initial kind of rush to provide resources or to provide people, to mobilizing resources to support the NHS, you know, the turning over of lab facilities to make PPE, you know, like the early graduation of medical students to move to the front line. There was a huge amount of really effective work, I think, from the university sector. And I think, I have to warn you, I found this film very, very emotional, but this short film, I think, captures beautifully. And this is a speech from an online graduation ceremony at the University of Nottingham for their medical students who graduated early this year so that they could get out onto the front lines.
By graduating early, you are making history. You are the first medical students to do so in the peacetime history of this nation. You are graduating under extraordinary and difficult circumstances at a time of great national need. You studied medicine because you want to help others. So use your knowledge, skills, and experience. Use your intelligence, good sense, and initiative. And most of all, use your empathy, understanding, and compassion. Go well and do good.
Yeah, and I think that going well and doing good, I think, really does capture the essence of what this year has been about for many of us. You know, being able to play our part, small part maybe, in supporting our institutions and our colleagues and our partners to step up to these challenges. So I think that, you know, there's been such a beautiful kind of strong positive set of outcomes, but I think it's been a year of extremes, and there have been some really difficult things, I think, that we're still trying to deal with. You know, and currently the return of students to our cities, I think a lot of our colleagues who work in public engagement roles are saying how much pressure this is putting on community relationships in many cities. And, you know, I think the brutal exposure of inequality, you know, the murder of George Floyd, the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement this summer, you know, I think it's forced us to confront our complicity in structural racism and in social inequality. And of course, the long-term economic impact of the pandemic is going to put enormous pressure on university finances and is threatening, I think, the long-term sustainability of engagement work. So a year of extremes, I think. And public engagement professionals have really had to hold a path through this and balance the complexities thrown up by the pandemic and the varied ways that they've actually been invited to support their institutions. You know, so some have been furloughed, some haven't had contracts renewed, some have been working balancing caring responsibilities, some have been shifted into different roles supporting other aspects of their university's work. You know, I think all of us have tried to contribute in really important ways to navigating the crisis. And I think it is important to remember that. And so the final set of interviews is about things that we feel proud of in the work that we've done and the ways that we've navigated these extremes.
I'd say it's because despite our gut reaction, we actually paused everything. We sought knowledge, we networked and reviewed our projects. And we really decided what we could and we should be converting to an online space. And most of all, we gave ourselves permission to fail, which I think was really important.
So everyone was like, take everything online. And I spent a lot of time at the start trying to convince people not to take stuff online because some things can't be translated.
The thing I feel most proud of, you know, in the work we've done around COVID is the students and the academic staff that we would work with to do community engaged research projects. I'm just so proud of them for getting through that time and still managing to do something meaningful for communities.
We were doing a support mechanism for maids and domestic workers who were facing harassment and sexual harassment as well. There is hardly one phone a family, so women don't get access, adolescent boys and girls don't get access. So they adapted. They use WhatsApp, they use some other music um, tools, and I think I learned a great deal of facilitating participatory learning in the virtual space from them.
I think the thing I'm most proud of is probably the young people that I work with rather than myself or my team. So within my role, I work with a group of young people who've lived experience of mental health difficulty, but have been incredibly adaptable and, you know, continue to make really great, valuable contributions to the work that we do. So that's what I'd say I'm most proud of.
I feel most proud of the relationships and the partnerships which have been nurtured. And a lot of that is down to years and years of working with people to establish a sense of trust. And that's meant that when things have been really difficult and challenging, because we've had that really strong relationship, we've been able to understand each other and make things work.
When we had a call out for help in a particular area, I mean, we were inundated. It was just absolutely life-affirming to see people from all parts of the university, and has actually given me a brighter and an optimistic sense of the community spirit that does exist. I mean, once you're pricked, everyone bleeds. And I think it's beautiful to see that. No one's a rock.
I wonder whether there's anybody who would like to pop their hand in the air and share a reflection. There's some great reflections in chat, so do keep those coming and we'll have a quick look at some of those. But I wonder if anybody wants to pop their hand in their air and share either a challenge that they are facing or something positive that they're seeing in light of response to this pandemic. Anybody want to pop their hand up? Anybody want to pop their hand up?
I think Dom's got his hand up.
Has it? Oh, so could somebody make me co-host because I can't see their hands up? And Dom, let's come to you.
Hi, yeah, I thought one. So I've got two things. Like, sort of in terms of difficult, was the remaining positive, especially kind of when you're leading a team in particular, because it's kind of admitting when things are beyond your control, and that, you know, actually saying like, I can't do anything about this, and I kind of making sure that the rest of the team understand that, and keeping that up and keeping that energy up, and kind of like sort of and balancing that out with actually staying positive has been a bit of a challenge. In terms of a positive, I've actually found that we are talking a lot more across the university, so professional services in particular. Like, we're coming together a lot more, like on Zoom and stuff, and there's more of an emphasis to kind of work together on a lot of things. So that's been really, really lovely to kind of see. Like, yeah, everyone's been more available in terms of kind of that side of things. So it's been great because I think we can do some really good things together going forward. Anyways, something bad is something good for me to start off.
Oh, that's brilliant. And thanks for being brave enough to speak out, Dom. Great to have your input as always, and lovely to see you. Anybody else want to pop their hands up? I'm still not a co-host, so one of my co-hosts will have to help me. Ah, brilliant, I am now. So Charlotte, you want to say something, so I'll come to you, and then Claudia, I'll come to you afterwards.
Welcome to my kitchen where you've caught me Christmas cake making. My big thing this year has been that, I put it in the chat, but that sense of learning things that I still have yet to do rather than things I don't know how to do. So yes, I can't see people's reactions online, but maybe I can learn how to make a new space to interact with people. And one of the things that's been really lovely has been a number of people who've really wanted to be trained on really thoughtful and meaningful online interaction. So I think there's really a case to be made going forward that we should be compassionate to ourselves and to others about the way we interact in these online spaces, but we should remember that when we go back to the in-person things, because there's something more accessible about the world at the moment for many people, and we should strive to keep that.
Brilliant. Thank you, Charlotte. That's really helpful. I'm just seeing Helen commenting about this this idea of, oh no, it wasn't Helen actually, was it Helen? That, you know, like nothing is permanent, and it just reminded me of my my late father saying, you know, all this will pass, all this will pass, the good times and the bad times. So I was going to come to Claudia. Do you want to pop your video on and say hi?
Hi, I'm Claudia.
Claudia, sorry, forgive me.
It's fine. So I guess the positive thing is, you know, I have reflected a lot on how easy, quote inverted quotes, minus technical difficulties, it has been for us to sort of transfer all of our work online, even though clearly, you know, it has a huge impact on the workload and mental health and everything else. But it's also a matter of, I enjoy the feeling of being challenged on not just using online, even though at the moment this is all I can practically do. I enjoy feeling committed to, this is not all I want to do forever, not just because we're going to go back to at some point engaging in person, but because we want to look for other things. So I want to phrase this as a positive. And I feel that one of the challenges that we have is getting our work to be recognized as something that is still building meaning, something that maybe with the added value that it is draining for us to keep doing all that student engagement and being there for our communities, that what we are doing, you know, who more, who less matters, and that we need to use this, we need to do evaluation impact of everything that we do, but now more so than ever, because we need to be creative and show that what we do actually does matter, and getting people to support this work.
Brilliant. Great. Thank you, Claudia. And thank you for being prepared to share your thoughts. I'm going to turn now to our conference reporters, who I'm hoping will be able to pop their hands in the air to share maybe some of your reflections on some of the stuff that's happening in chat, but also in terms of some of the positives and some of the challenges that we are experiencing. I wonder if any of our conference reporters wants to pop their hand in the air. I can't see you. I can see, but you're not one of our conference reporters, but I'll come to you, Avon. It's so nice to see you all the way from Thailand. You're very welcome. Why don't you tell us some of your reflections?
Yes, good evening from Thailand. I have two good news and one very bad news. We just lost our colleagues. She is the really prime mover of societal engagement in Thailand, because she had received her assistant professor using her societal engagement, but she died 5 days ago. That's our big loss. But our good news, yeah.
Avon, how tragic. That's really, really sad to hear. I'm so very sorry.
Yeah, thank you so much. Two good news. One was that at Chiang Mai University, we have a chance to facilitate to help 2,963 unemployment by having our CMU scholars, 133 of them, facilitate 333 project to help reskill and upskill of those unemployment by the financial support from the Ministry of Higher Education, Research, Science and Innovation. And another good news for me, I have got, let me see, I have got the award from Asia Engage last week, and that's very good news for CMU, for our leading law on societal engagement.
Oh,
thank you.
Oh, congratulations, Yvonne, and so nice to see you. And a lot of messages expressing sorrow for the loss that you've experienced, and we stand alongside you. And this pandemic has taken many lives, and it's deeply tragic. And so I'm very, very sorry. And it's lovely to have you here. And if you're interested in hearing more about Yvonne and her colleagues' work, there's a workshop on Thursday at 8:30, so in the morning. It's a breakfast meeting, so I hope that will be a great time to learn more about it. But thank you for sharing, Yvonne. And I'm going to come over. Oh, it's good to see you. And I'm going to come over to Akram. Thanks for volunteering. And you're one of our conference reporters. So Akram's one of our conference reporters. So he's from Brunel University. And Akram, over to you.
Sophie, thank you very much. I mean, I've got a pessimistic and an optimistic reflection. And I think just reading through the papers today, I mean, there are going to be many challenges and issues that we're going to have to deal with in the medium to long term. In particular, rising, I mean, I read today, rising mental health issues, unemployment, crime, housing crisis, domestic violence, recession, heightened conflict, violence, and all of this stuff. I think it really does look bleak to some extent if you look in the immediate future. But I think within that, you see some real, very important things about the fissures within our society that we have not taken care to look at. There have been many, systematic issues that we have glossed over, with Black Lives Matter, we've seen, and with the COVID, and in particular, the impact of COVID on different parts of our society. And our society is built upon, certain strands, and those strands are being decimated to a large extent. But I think what I value the most and the brightness in all of this is the fact that actually we need to change our value systems. We need to reevaluate what we truly feel is valuable, as opposed to fitting into an already well-configured way of what we think is important. We need to look back and feel something emotionally, and only then will we change our value systems. And I think you quoted you said some beautiful words at the start. I mean, this idea about empathy, idea about trust, and critically, idea about kindness. They all come not from the intellectual engagement with these words and the intellectualization of building strategies and operational documents. It actually comes through being emotionally engaged with it, feeling what the other feels, and only then can you become something anew, I think.
Thank you, Akram, for those beautiful reflections. And I was noticing in chat as you were speaking a really honest reflection, I thought, from Becky. Thank you for sharing that. But actually, for many, their experiences of lockdown have been very different. And so actually there is that real challenge that many people have been furloughed. Many have been doing the immense work of homeschooling their children, caring for their children, or caring for other loved ones. And that actually, therefore, that ability to then contribute within the paid employment part of your role has been very different. And I think that the way I see it, and this may or may not be helpful, is that all of that has been a critical contribution to weathering the storm of COVID in our society. And the work that we're doing at home, caring for those that we love, and the work that we're doing to animate our universities are equivalent. They're about really trying to help kind of weather this storm so that we can ensure that the most vulnerable members in our society are supported, and that we all kind of emerge from this crisis. Okay, I'm going to turn to our other reporters, and I'm going to ask Emma, Dawn, or Bentley, do you have any reflections before we move on? Oh, Dawn, brilliant. I'll come over to you. Let me just spotlight you.
Sì, sono arrivato proprio oggi. Oggi la Sabrina ha usato le applicazioni.
Oh gosh, bear with me just a sec. Let me just just a second. Excuse me a moment while I just try and find what I'm going to do is I'm going to mute everybody, and then can you pop your mic back on, Dawn? There you go. If you pop your mic back on, you can speak.
Good. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I just wanted to pick up a bit, I think, on the paradoxes of 2020. I think no one has had a good time all of the time. And a lot of the divisions that were so apparent in society in this world beforehand have really just been exaggerated. So, you know, people might have been on furlough and feel that they're out of the system. People might have worked the whole way through and feel they haven't had a break. It doesn't sit well or sit comfortably for any of us. And I think that's perhaps going to be quite difficult moving forward, and that we just need to remember that it's not been straightforward.
Yeah, no,
That's really, I think, the point, that there's this diversity, but yet perhaps the one thing that brings us all together is it's been hard.
Yeah, it's been really hard. And I think that we can't underestimate the impact that this has had and will continue to have on us all. Bentley, I'm going to come to you. So Dawn's one of our reporters, and now also Bentley. So Bentley, I'm coming to you. And if I'm intelligent enough, I'll spotlight you. Let me just do that. There we go.
Thank you, Sophie. Yeah, just picking up on a few points. To me, I think when we talk about how we're connecting people, it's where we're doing the engaging as well. There is this, we're taking things online, but that also means you're taking it into someone's personal space, into the domestic space. And we already have this blurring of lines between the workspace and the domestic space. So you have this sort of peri-domestic area, and you can see from the chat people saying, oh, I wasn't expecting, you know, to talk about, you know, grief or empathy or stuff like that. These things kind of popping up in people's domestic spaces, and then us perhaps just disappearing from that space. And it's what you're leaving behind in that space and what you're leaving behind with people. And I don't think necessarily we've been thinking about what level of care it takes to kind of end things well, and what you deliberately leave behind lingering, and what you might create space for kind of to talk through together, because it is difficult popping up in someone's you know, in their domestic space, that you've never really been able to do, introduce these quite difficult topics sometimes, and then you just disappear. So there's another level of kind of ethics and complexity to think that, and they can be very useful, but we need to be really aware of that.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you, Bentley. I think that yeah, really wise reflections. I'm just going to hand over to Emma. I hope you're there, Emma. I wonder whether you can. Oh, there you are. Do you want to put your hand up, because then you'll come top of my list, and then I can spotlight you.
Weirdly, I can only clap. I can't put a hand up. I do not know why.
Okay, bear with me just a second, and I'll come and find you so that I can spotlight you. If I remove your spotlight, Bentley, you should come into the main screen anyway, because you're speaking. So try again.
Okay, I'll try speaking again, and maybe
perfect.
that'll work.
Perfect.
Is that okay?
Yeah, perfect.
I suppose the thing that I have been thinking about is sort of the value of story, and even, you know, in the chat, and the different stories and the different stories people are telling about this time. And I know even from my work with students, you know, you're frustrated because a student doesn't turn up for a meeting, and then you discover that their mum's a key worker and actually they've been caring for a sibling with a disability, and there are all sorts of reasons why they didn't come to something they were supposed to come to. And I suppose the other thing that I'm thinking about too, though, is because for us as public engagement professionals, the challenge is that we are hearing and absorbing all these stories and trying to support so many different people to do things that we really care about. And it sort of feels to me like maybe it was meant to be that we had a private reflection time there, because how many of us have really stopped and gone inwards and thought, what does this mean to me and for me? Because so much of our time is spent thinking about those other people that we work with professionally. So I suppose I'm kind of looking forward to, there's a workshop this afternoon actually about supporting mental health amongst PEPs as well. And I think that's going to be something really valuable. But I suppose it's just observing this tension between the need to support other people and to look outwards and to recognise that there's something I think that's going to be very interesting in this conference, is trying to find the language to recognize all of the different emotions that all of us have felt, because some of us might talk about excitement when others are thinking about loss and grief. And that's going to be a bit of a challenge for all of us, I think. And we've already had this here, but I think we've got the right people to help us through that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you raised a really important point there, that, that, as you say, some of us are wanting to be very positive, think proactively about some of the positives that have come out of this tragic and awful situation. And as you say, many of us are grieving, or we're really challenged by the circumstances that we found ourselves in, or those that we love have found themselves in. So there's that really, really challenging. I think that we're going to move on. So Paul and I are going to share a few of our reflections on some of the themes that are emerging for us, some of the challenges that have led to those themes being increasingly important. They're not new. They're things that we've been talking about for a long time together as a collective. But we think that they've been really kind of heightened by the current context. So I don't know if you're ready to share your slides, Paul. I know I said I'd give you a pre-ramble. I hope that was enough of a pre-ramble. And I'm handing over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sophie. And yeah, we wanted to sort of develop the session now to just share some of our thoughts, really, and how we've tried to make sense of this year. And it's been a roller coaster, absolutely. And Helen's words earlier, I thought, vividly described that. But the image that we chose to kind of capture how it's felt for us is this one. It's a lighthouse, and it's crashing waves. And I think it's felt a bit overwhelming. It's felt absolutely breathtaking. Some of the change we've had to experience and make sense of. But what we've also tried to do is to keep some kind of vision, some kind of perspective. And what does this all mean for the engagement work that we care about? So what we want to do just briefly is look at 3 areas where we think the pressures on us in the university sector are most intense, and where effective engagement has the most to offer. And there are areas where we think the stakes are really high. And the first, I think, has come up really strongly in the conversations about being responsive. And earlier, I think Kirsty talked about universities as like oil tankers, but wow, the speed with which they've pivoted and the changes that have been accomplished in such a short period of time have been breathtaking. But I think it's also about the human connectedness and the care that we've also been able to demonstrate as a sector, I think, to really reach out and take responsibility. So that's one area. The second area, I think, is just about trust and trustworthiness. And this has really been thrown into relief around science and the role of science and research in supporting us collectively to make good decisions. And finally, I think it's around how we act on inclusion and inequality. So we're just going to briefly reflect on those 3 areas. And we're going to start, I think, with responsive.
Yeah, so many of you who came to our conference last year, I know we've got a lot of new guests as well, but at our last conference, you may remember Julia Unwin, who put out a challenge for us, really. And this quote really resonated with me. She said that universities and people who work in universities are used to being the cleverest person in the room. And when you work in place, you're never the cleverest person in the room, because by definition, you know less. But to go in with humility, offering the assets you have, the extraordinary analytic power, the buildings you have, seems to me to be an offer that has never been more urgent. And I don't know some of you will remember, she urged universities to change. And just like the Nottingham film so beautifully captured, she urged us to work with our heads and our hearts, and to really recognise the needs that existed outside the institution. And little did Julia know how immediately universities would be challenged to demonstrate those kinds of behaviours in light of the pandemic. And lots of universities have been very responsive, and I've got a couple of examples, but they're not all. But this is an example from University of Newcastle, which typifies a lot of the stories of universities stepping up. So they were talking about the research effort they were doing around COVID, the collaborative effort with others around a response to COVID, and then also thinking really, really hard about how they, as an institution, could engage with their students whilst also being sensitive to the fact that students coming to an area could cause problems for the local community, and how to manage that in a COVID secure way. You know, and a recent return to students to their cities has been a real challenge, I think. And we've heard from a lot of public engagement professionals saying that impact that has had on existing community relationships, that there's a real challenge with that. But, you know, Newcastle's got some great resources about how they've responded, but they're not alone in that. And here in Bristol, we also have examples of how universities have been responding. Oh, and we have got the slide. Brilliant. So, you know, the University of West of England and Bristol University doing a lot to resource the NHS in the immediate aftermath of the crisis, and particularly, you know, one of the Nightingale hospitals built on a resource of that UWE had, that's now a hospital ready and waiting to deal with the recent rise of cases. And so, on the next slide, we have basically, if you like, a scale of a worst case to best case scenario. And when I'm thinking about universities being responsive, there is that kind of challenge about, as the economic crisis kind of comes into full kind of focus, that HEIs begin to be more self-interested, less flexible, and slow to respond, perhaps battening down their hatches and saying, you know, how are we going to get through, rather than thinking about the role that they can play being responsive and engaged with society. But the best case gives me cause for hope, as universities and research organisations and others are more responsive and skillful, and are committed partners working alongside others to really make a change.
And the second area we wanted to touch on is this area around trust and around ethics, which Bentley mentioned earlier. And I think, as well as really spotlighting our responsibilities and our role in place, the pandemic has really focused us, I think, on the role of science and the relationship between science and research and society, and the really highly charged relationship that actually is. I think we've really seen those pressures really come to bear. And you know, this editorial in The Lancet calls it a stress test for trust in science, which I think evokes it brilliantly. You know, I've never had so many conversations with people about research and about science and about universities. You know, it's been on the news, in social media, you know, friends are talking about it. It's in all your kind of WhatsApp groups. People are talking about the latest vaccine and is this and is that. And, you know, it's amazing the amount of conversation, but also there are some really huge risks, I think, around what those conversations have revealed. And we just want to show you a short film that captures some of those issues around science and society.
We have a global problem that requires a global solution. We need the best science in the world.
The COVID-19 pandemic has put the spotlight on virologists.
Well, right now.
But their star status has also made them the target of public anger, even death threats.
And people, because of their lack of trust and authority, would not want to take the vaccine. People think that we want to shut the country down.
We're not just fighting an epidemic, we're fighting an infodemic. Fake news spreads faster and more easily than this virus, and is just as dangerous.
Then I see the disinfectant, where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that?
Now, all I can summarise the response really to this is incredulity, condemnation, consternation. No one could quite believe that these were the words coming out of the mouth of the president.
They have a plan, all 27 pages of it, outlining what they are doing for coronavirus and what they will do should it become an epidemic.
That number.
So there is no transparency in the process. And so when ministers and the Prime Minister say that they are simply following science advice all the time, we, the public, don't have any check on that.
It's changing on very high speed, and people collect data and assess data and can have different assessments of these data. This is the normal thing that in science you can have disputes.
But so, if it's changing all the time, Annette, how can we trust science?
That's a very good question.
Yeah, very good question indeed. I hate it when people talk about engagement as soft and fluffy, you know. I mean, I think these developments have demonstrated what a sharp and hard edge there is now to our collective ability to connect research with society. And again, I think it feels like the scales are finely balanced. You know, this is a stark contrast between the collapse of trust, but we've seen real evidence, I think, that is happening. At the same time, I think we've seen great examples of researchers being trustworthy, to act with integrity, you know, and I think this is a huge challenge and an opportunity for those of us who work in engagement. It forces us to ask, really, are the ways we're currently engaging with the public adequate to the task, to the context in which we're now working to navigate these intense pressures?
And the final theme that we thought was really important was inclusion. And the pandemic has starkly highlighted the inequalities in our society. The murder of George Floyd in the US and the campaigning of the Black Lives Movement created what felt like unstoppable momentum, mobilizing millions of people to take action against racism. And it has raised consciousness of the inherent racism in institutional structures and woken people up to the urgent need for change. And in the aftermath of George Floyd's murder, there was a flurry of commitments by universities and statements. But what next? How could that change actually be actioned to change the very fabric of our institutions? Acknowledging the reality of institutional racism, exclusion, of inequality, and of the need to take action to level up has shifted the policy discourse significantly and has also made us consider our own roles in making change happen. And we have seen how quickly change can happen. The response to COVID has, seen significant change in a host of domains in short timescales. So whilst institutional change has seemed to take time, it would appear that we can act more quickly and should do so. For those of us who recognise the value of engagement, there is a clear call to be inclusive in our practice. But how does that translate to changing the cultures and staffing of our institutions? We see here we end up reinforcing inequality rather than contributing to addressing the root causes of racism and inequality. And as Kerry Facer said at Engage several years ago, the question is not how will researchers engage with communities, but how will communities become the university themselves?
So just to wrap this up, I think, these themes are going to run through the conference, I think, and they are so profound actually at the moment. And going back to this image we started with, it doesn't feel over dramatic, and I think we have to hold, we do need to act almost like a lighthouse to say these things really, really matter, and we have to get them right. And we're going to pick these threads up right through the conference. You'll see from the plenaries that are coming up in the workshops, and we'll come back to them in the final plenary. So it's challenging. It is challenging, but we hope that the week ahead is going to give us space for some collective thinking together to make sense of this.
Thanks, Paul. And I just want to urge you to take some time this week. There's been some really beautiful comments in the chat about how guilty some of us are feeling, how privileged some of us are feeling, how distressed around the loss that we're experiencing. And we are amongst friends here. This group of people who've come to spend time at the conference have been through a whole load of things. So let's walk alongside each other and use those opportunities to hear each other and to express some of the things that are difficult to talk about, in the hope that we can make positive steps for navigating the crisis that we're facing now and in the future. Now, I did say to our lovely conference reporters that I'd come back to them, but I don't seem to have managed our time very well. But our conference reporters are going to be here for the whole conference. They're going to be coming to workshops and in networking events. They'll be broadcasting live every day in our live stream. And then on Friday, they're going to take the stage and tell us some of the reflections that they're having. So I hope, lovely conference reporters, that you'll forgive me. It's 1 minute to 3, and you always know we finish our plenaries on time, but it's been really wonderful just to get a collective breath and to spend some time together now. And we really, really look forward to carrying on these conversations.